On the night of September 26, 1983, the world nearly ended. It didn't happen with a public breakdown in diplomacy, a sudden military mobilization, or a formal declaration of war. Instead, civilization arrived at the precipice of total annihilation because of a silent line of automated computer code running inside a hidden Soviet bunker. At the absolute peak of Cold War nuclear paranoia, the Soviet Union's state-of-the-art satellite monitoring system suddenly reported that a surprise American first strike had been launched. The automated mainframes indicated 5 Minuteman missiles were actively tracking across the upper atmosphere, heading directly for Moscow. The military protocol was absolute: launch a full-scale retaliatory strike before the American warheads reached their targets. The entire Soviet retaliatory apparatus was primed to execute a catastrophic launch-on-warning sequence within a tight 12-minute window. The continuation of human history did not come down to the decisions of presidents, premiers, or cabinets. The fate of billions of lives fell entirely onto the shoulders of a single man, a 44-year-old software engineer and lieutenant colonel named Stanislav Petrov. He was the duty officer on watch. He looked at the flashing crimson alarms, chose to disregard protocol, and decided to do absolutely nothing. He chose to disobey. To understand why Petrov's command chair became a psychological furnace that night, you have to understand the terrifying landscape of September 1983. Superpower relations had deteriorated to a toxic threshold not seen since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Merely 25 days prior to this night, Soviet Sukhoi interceptors had shot down a commercial passenger plane, Korean Airlines Flight 007, after confusing it for an American surveillance aircraft. All 269 civilian passengers on board were killed, including a sitting United States congressman. The West was paralyzed with fury. The East was consumed by a deep, systematic state paranoia. In Moscow, General Secretary Yuri Andropov was thoroughly convinced that a Western surprise nuclear first strike was imminent. Under the ultra-secret command directive known as Operation Ryan, every single KGB and GRU officer worldwide was placed on an emergency hair-trigger alert. Their singular directive: monitor Western hospitals, government buildings, and military bases for any logistical sign that the Americans were preparing to initiate a nuclear holocaust. This was the psychological crucible surrounding Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Yevgrafovich Petrov. Born near Vladivostok in 1939, to a decorated World War II fighter pilot and a military nurse, Petrov was a child of the Soviet military machine. Yet underneath the uniform, he harbored a rare dual nature, combining the deep internal sensibilities of an intellectual with a remarkably sharp engineering mind. He was a scientist first, a soldier second. Petrov was not a traditional line officer trained to execute commands blindly. He graduated from the elite Kiev Higher Engineering Radio Technical College, specializing in cybernetics, advanced software architecture, and radar systems engineering. His technical brilliance eventually landed him a placement within the development team of the Soviet Union's most advanced strategic defense asset, the OKO satellite system. Literally translated, the Eye. By 1983, he had risen to become a senior engineer and the deputy chief of the Department for Combat Algorithms. This was a critical distinction. Petrov didn't just operate the computer terminals. He had personally reviewed, tested, and audited the underlying software code governing the entire early warning missile network. He knew its quirks. He knew its mathematical margins of error. And most importantly, he was deeply skeptical of automation. At home, Petrov lived a completely separate life. To shield his family from the terrifying weight of his assignment, he never discussed his work. His wife and children knew him only as a quiet, devoted father who worked long, classified hours. They had no idea that his specific understanding of automated logic was about to become the final human circuit breaker preventing the end of the world. Midnight, September 26, 1983. Petrov arrived at the underground command center of Serpukhov 15 to oversee a routine 12-hour night watch. He wasn't even scheduled to be there. He was unexpectedly filling in for a colleague who had fallen ill. a twist of fate that placed an analytical engineer in the command chair instead of a rigid, rule-following career officer. Serpukhov 15 was the central nervous hub for the western sector of the Oko early warning array. High above the atmosphere, the Soviet spy satellite Cosmos 1382 was cruising along a highly elliptical Molniya orbit, its cryogenically cooled infrared telescopes aimed directly at the American military heartland of Montana. At exactly 12:15 a.m., the bunker's M10 supercomputer roared to life. The massive electronic tactical wallboard lit up, flashing a single terrifying word: Zapusk launch. The supercomputer claimed absolute certainty. Under Soviet protocol, Petrov had less than 10 minutes to report this detection up the chain of command to the General Staff. If he confirmed the launch on warning doctrine would take over, presenting Yuri Andropov with a window to hit the launch buttons, sending thousands of thermonuclear warheads flying back across the Atlantic. Then the computer fired a second alert, then a third, a fourth, a fifth. The system was now tracking 5 nuclear missiles slicing through the upper atmosphere. The countdown timer was calculating the exact remaining flight time before nuclear fireballs vaporized Moscow. The automated system was no longer suggesting a possibility. It was declaring an active war. Petrov's subordinates were screaming for his authorization to send the alert up to Central Command. Petrov later recounted that his legs felt completely limp, his body pinned to the chair under an almost physical pressure. He had no secondary verification. Petrov contacted the land-based over-the-horizon radar technicians. They reported back that their long-range radar installations showed absolutely nothing in the air. But Petrov knew a terrifying catch. Land-based radar was limited by the physical curvature of the Earth. It would not physically see the missiles until the warheads were mere minutes from impact. He was operating in a total informational vacuum. He had to make a blind choice. Petrov faced a choice with a literal 50-50 chance of error. If he followed protocol and reported the 5 missiles, he would trigger an immediate, accidental Third World War. If he disobeyed protocol and called it a false alarm, and he was wrong, the Soviet Union would be obliterated in minutes without firing a single weapon back. Petrov took a deep breath, called the duty officer at Soviet Air Defense Headquarters, and stated clearly that the automated alert was a complete false alarm caused by a systemic computer malfunction. Nothing happened. No nuclear detonations shook the Earth. No shock waves leveled cities. The screens remained empty. Stanislav Petrov's human engineering judgment had successfully broken the automated kill chain, saving the world from an accidental global holocaust. What could possibly fool the crown jewel of Soviet military defense automation? It was an extraordinary multi-layered alignment of space, weather, and light. Subsequent secret investigations revealed that a rare celestial alignment had occurred during the autumn equinox. The Cosmos 1382 satellite had passed over the United States at an angle where the sun rose perfectly over the horizon, casting high-intensity solar rays directly onto high-altitude cirrus clouds over North Dakota. This sunlight glinted off the ice crystals within the clouds, reflecting a blinding concentration of mid-infrared light straight into the satellite's telescope lens. The Oko system was completely blind to this specific environmental condition because it lacked multi-wavelength optical filters. The software engineers had rushed the system onto active combat duty to satisfy the Kremlin's political demands, leaving a critical algorithmic vulnerability open. It took the independent logic of a human engineer to spot the systemic flaw that the machine insisted was absolute truth. In a logical world, Stanislav Petrov would have walked out of that bunker to public parades, international peace medals, and global praise. But he lived inside the rigid, face-saving bureaucracy of the Soviet state. Immediately following the false alarm, a high-level state commission descended upon Serpukhov 15. Instead of celebrating his restraint, military investigators subjected Petrov to 3 days of aggressive questioning without sleep, attempting to turn him into a convenient scapegoat to conceal the terrifying technical incompetence of their military hardware. To shield the reputations of senior military scientists and defense officials who spent billions of rubles on a flawed system, the State Commission chose to bury the incident completely under a blanket of high-level classification. Petrov was officially reprimanded, not for ignoring the alarm, but for failing to properly fill out the bunker's combat logbook during the 15 minutes of the crisis. Petrov pointed out that he was holding a phone in one hand and an intercom in the other, leaving him without a third hand to write down logs while saving the world. His explanation was ignored. His military career was permanently shattered. Quietly reassigned to a low-level desk post, he suffered a severe nervous breakdown from the psychological trauma of that night, retiring early from the military in 1984 to care for his cancer-stricken wife. He fell into complete impoverished obscurity. Humanity didn't learn about the night it almost died until 1998, when a retired Soviet general finally published his private memoirs, sending international journalists racing to track Petrov down to his cramped suburban apartment. International accolades, peace prizes, and global recognition slowly caught up to him late in life. Yet until his quiet death on May 19, 2017, Petrov steadfastly rejected the label of a hero. He maintained a simple engineering perspective until his final breath. I was just doing my job. I was an engineer, and I was the right person at the right time. Stanislav Petrov's death at age 77 went largely unnoticed by a busy world, but his legacy stands as the definitive warning against our growing reliance on automated warfare. Today, as modern global militaries push deeper into artificial intelligence, autonomous kill chains, and hyper-fast automated response systems, the window of time for human intervention shrinks with every passing year. The lesson of Serpukhov 15 is absolute. Technology, no matter how sophisticated, can be blinded by an unforeseen alignment of light and clouds. Systems can glitch. Mainframes can miscalculate. In the ultimate moment of structural failure, when the machinery of war demands absolute annihilation, the most vital safeguard on this planet is not an algorithm, a supercomputer, or a satellite network. It is the calm defiance of a single human being who dares to think for himself. If you found this story as chilling and powerful as we did, if it made you pause and wonder just how fragile our world really is, then don't let this be the end. Subscribe to Thinkularity for more untold moments, forgotten heroes, and near impossible escapes from the edge of history. Leave a like if this made you feel something. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And if you want to dive deeper into cosmic mysteries, human decisions, and the razor-thin line between what happened and what almost did, we've got more stories coming. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the quietest people save the loudest worlds.